Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome once again to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and with me, as always, is Abby from Life Work Balance. How you doing today, Abby?
We are trucking along. I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have today. It seems like you have a good starting place for us with something that is going to be probably resonating with a lot of the people who watch our show today.
Absolutely, yes. I had a comment on my channel, and let's just dive right into this.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is the comment. Someone says, "I'm a bit tired because these days it is not enough to want to work and work hard, and be able to do the work with your skills, education, and abilities. You have to care about the company beyond all reason, but the reverse is not true."
Mhm.
So I thought we would talk about this because I think a lot of people are kind of expressing a similar sentiment to this.
Absolutely. In particular with their job search. And while it comes to feeling this way, maybe while you're employed as well, that's not a reason for them to like fire you or let you go necessarily. But when it comes to job searching and interviewing, if you don't sell yourself in a way that connects you to the organization and demonstrates, in addition to your skills, your education, your ability to do the job, your willingness to work and your willingness to work hard, in addition to that, if you don't communicate your passion and the value that you're going to provide to the organization, the team, your direct supervisor, then there's probably someone else who will during the interview process, and they'll probably go with them. So interviewing
Absolutely.
is all about this like marketing of yourself. And we're not used to doing that. And it can get really frustrating and disheartening when you feel like you're perfectly qualified for a position and you just, or positions that you're applying to over and over and over again, and you're just not getting any interest or past the first or second round of interviews or into the hiring process. It's really disheartening.
Yeah, it's like I've it feels like I see this kind of thing a lot in terms of the comments on my channel. People that understandably, they feel like it's a very asymmetric kind of situation. You have to basically go cap in hand, on your knees to the employer, and you have to treat them with respect, and you have to ask very nicely if they can give you a job, but you don't feel it's an equal type situation,
Yep.
and people are first of all confused about that, and I would say, like, to this person here, first of all, it's totally understandable how you would feel this way, and you're not wrong to feel this way. Uh, I would say it's because you're simply like you're going to them to ask for a job. That's what's leading to this situation. It's like a power imbalance, you
Yes.
know, and they're looking down on high and judging you and all that, and you feel you have to be like super polite and all this. It's like, because really what's going on is you're asking them, like, they put out a listing. They said we're looking for this, and then they got everybody who is interested in that to apply, and there's many people applying. So they're in a position where they're able to pick and choose between people. So therefore that gives them the power,
The upper
and
hand.
yeah, and you're right to sort of realize that about the situation. It's not equal, because another sentiment. I mean, I'm sure, Abby, you probably get people saying this too. They say, like, well, it's as much an interview. You're interviewing them as they're interviewing you, and that is true to a degree. But I think a lot of people would agree that it really doesn't feel like that.
Right. And it feels like there's not this like equitable back and forth. It's with an interview in general, it's you show up when they tell you to show up, they ask you a set of questions, and there may or may not be time for some other conversation for questions that you might have, etc. And so having a really good interview, that's one of the keys, is figuring out how to not only answer the questions that they've already prepared for you, but also make it more conversational, make it more data gathering for yourself so that you can feel like you have some agency and choice in this decision as well. Because it would really suck to have an interview for a position and answer all the questions in the way that they want you to answer them, get hired into the position, and then you realize you actually don't like this job or you don't like this company.
Yeah.
So it is very helpful to interview the interviewers, but it's not second nature to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's absolutely true. And I just see we've got some comments. So Alpine's Palace here says, "Hey, Bill and Abby, can you please define blue collar, white collar?" Okay, we can get to that in a second. But then you say, did someone say here? Did somebody say power imbalance? That's the definition of bullying. I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, the fact that they're canvassing people who want a job,
Mm-hmm.
and there are many people that apply for it, so they have the luxury of choice, and that gives them a bit of power in the sense that there's a lot of demand for it, so they get to pick and choose. And I mean, I'm not sure of the way to technically describe the situation, but there is a power imbalance simply because they can decide, and that's noticeable in how it feels. But I don't think bullying really comes into play. I don't think that's really
I would agree.
fair.
And I would say that if you have a candidate who has an offer from 2 or more companies, the candidate is in a position of power to kind of leverage the different companies and organizations and offer packages against one another to get the best option for themselves, which is essentially what an organization is doing when they're interviewing other candidates. They want to make sure that they find someone who does have all of the skills, education, experience, requirements, and who is the best bang for their buck. If they
Yeah.
have 2 people who are equitably qualified, and there's one person who's wanting $50,000 more than another, they're probably going to go with the person who wants the $50,000 less because they are equitably qualified, and the organization gets to pick, because they're in the position of power, who they're going to go with versus who they aren't.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I mean, you don't have control over somebody else's attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is that, like, it could be a situation where there really isn't a power imbalance, or maybe somebody's acting like, they have a position of power over you when they really might not. It might be a 50-50 thing. Both parties are there to see if it makes sense for them. They both have choice. It isn't like a master slave relationship. It's sort of like a, peer kind of relationship. We're both investigating to see if this makes sense for us. But perhaps one person is behaving as if, I have the power here. And that's not really reflecting reality, but yet they're acting like that. So you get that vibe. That could be another thing.
Yes. Well, and in reality, let's just talk about the true power imbalance when it comes to applying to jobs. It's perceived. I applied to the job, so I had the power to not even apply. So I wouldn't even have to be in this dynamic if I chose not to apply to this job.
Yeah.
And then I'm kind of putting this power, I'm giving this power to the employer, the interviewer, based on how I interact with them. And so we can reduce that power imbalance and make it a little bit more equitable by changing up our interview styles and tactics, make it more conversational. I'm interviewing them. They're not just interviewing me. I know exactly what I want. So I'm checking off boxes for myself mentally as they're checking off boxes for themselves about what they want from me as well. So it's all about that perception of power.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it really matters more, not necessarily what the reality is, but like, how somebody's behaving or how someone feels about it. And that might be completely disconnected from reality. And I think that a lot of job seekers, I'm sure you guys have found this before. You go and you interview for a job, and the person on your side of the table that represents the employer, they're acting like in a really arrogant way, or they're being disrespectful or condescending or whatever. And, it's almost like that could either be an act, like they're trying to get you to behave in a way. So they're sort of putting on this act so that you will kind of accept what they are offering or something. Or they could really just be that tone deaf and not understand really that you have options too. And you know what and your perception of it can be different. You might actually have options that, you don't feel you have options. So you feel like you have no choice but to be dictated to by these people, when that might not be accurate either. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things going on here,
Yeah. I think the moral of the story with this comment, though, that you got on your channel is that this is a very common feeling where I'm exhausted because I have the skills, I have the education, I have the abilities. I want to work and I'm going to work hard for this company. And I still am not getting any bites on my application.
Yes.
No interest. And there are many reasons why that could be happening. It could be your resume is not doing its job. It could be that you're just not interviewing very well. And so think about what is within your control. You cannot control the organization. You cannot control if they choose to move forward with you or not. But what you can control is how you apply, the effort you put into your resume, the follow up that you do or do not do, the networking that you engage in or don't engage in. Then you can also control how you prepare for your interview. Do you just look at potential interview questions and mentally rehearse them? Or do you go that step further and do a mock interview with someone and get some true feedback on your interviewing style and technique and your responses and how they sound? So all of those things are within your control. Focus on that instead of the things that are not within your control.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It seems like there's two kind of points I want to make. One is, okay, so the reason why it might feel that you don't have power in like a job interview type situation, you feel like they're dictating to you, they're maybe being disrespectful, there's an imbalance of power there, you feel like you have no choice but to sort of dance to their wishes, and while simultaneously they don't care about you. The How can you fix that? The way you can fix that is to go out and get other options. So
Right.
having multiple interviews obviously is a good thing. It gives you choice. If these people are behaving like a bunch of condescending pricks and they're not going to offer anything of value, make you a good offer, that's okay, because you have other irons in the fire. You're pursuing other leads. So that gives you power. That's also the basis behind negotiation, by the way. Like, for if you're negotiating salary, whatever, the more choices you have, the more offers or opportunities you're pursuing, that gives you more choice, and therefore you don't have to take these people's deal, right? The other thing that kind of comes into this, the second point I want to make, is that, like, okay, regardless of the reality, let's say you have other offers, other interviews lined up, so you don't feel like these people have power over you, they have you precisely where they want you, and you have to take whatever deal they offer. You do have other options, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to behave in a kind of arrogant way where you like broadcast this. You can behave in a very humble kind of way to these people, just to see maybe what they're going to offer, if anything. And then you also see kind of how they're behaving naturally. It's not worth fighting. It's not worth, like, having a real attitude in the interview just to sort of give a perception of, oh, I've got many choices. That can almost be self-defeating too.
Right.
So how you behave is also independent of what your situation actually is.
Yep.
There's a lot of things going on with this, that
Yeah. Well, and your nonverbal body language, the tone of voice that you have, the way that you kind of respond to emails and questions and things like that, all give some sort of indication to the hiring team on how interested you are or not. So if you put on this facade that you are, too good for this, you've got more skills than what they're looking for, you're not that interested, they're going to feel that. And so it does require you to be invested and enthusiastic and eager about the position, even if you've got some other irons in the fire, without communicating that they're not your number one priority.
Yeah, I mean, all of that could be accurate. Like, you do have other choices. You don't have to be dictated to by these people. You're doing fine. If they don't want to hire you, you've got plenty of other people that probably would want to hire you. You know what I'm saying? Like, that might be the reality, but acting like that and broadcasting that in an interview will get you eliminated. It's certainly before the offer stage. Maybe the strategy I'd recommend, and you can tell me what you think of this, is like, up until you get an offer, just behave in a very humble kind of way. Even if you have to kind of, it's hard to kind of bear this. It feels a little insulting. You have to kind of not push back and not say, hey, I'm not, you think I have low value. You're trying to convince me I have very low value. I actually am in demand. But you don't behave like that until you get an offer, and then you have the luxury of maybe being able to play hardball a bit, once
Yes.
they've committed to you.
And it's the same skills that we use when we're building relationships, whether it's,
Hmm.
friendships or more intimate relationships. You don't start off your very first interaction with someone saying like, well, I'm so great at this, and like trying to one up them and put them down and talk about how good you are. Like, it's just not how that works when it comes to
Yeah,
building
it's
relationships.
not etiquette. Yeah, exactly.
It's the same kind of mindset around that. You aren't unwilling to go to that place of conflict or maybe disagreement, but that's not the first place you start if you want to have a good long-term relationship.
Yeah, it's like now's not the time. You sort of get the offer first, be a little humble, just kind of bite your lip, and don't kind of brag about like all this stuff, or try and challenge them on things. But then later on, at the end of the day, you can do what you want, and you don't have to be pushed around if you have other options. You know what I'm saying? So the goal should be to get the other options and then behave strategically.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. And treat everyone with dignity and respect throughout the whole process.
Yes, absolutely. Regardless sometimes of how that might not be reciprocated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just because you're not treated well doesn't mean you suddenly get the green light to treat other people poorly.
Exactly. We've been letting a lot of questions build up here.
Yes.
Alpine's pal says here, it says, "Hey Bill, can you please define blue collar, white collar, and low level? I mean, these terms, they annoy you. Okay, well, hopefully it doesn't annoy you in a very extreme manner or anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, when it comes to blue collar versus white collar, my interpretation of that is blue collar is a little bit more like hands-on trades or technical work, whereas white collar is more like office building, corporate. Um, if I think of a blue collar worker, what comes to mind first for me is someone who works a lot with their hands, like maybe a plumber or an electrician. Um, they work really hard and they have a,
Sewage treatment attendant, yes,
yeah, yeah. Whereas someone who's white collar might be wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase into a corporate office building. And they do a lot of like,
wearing a top hat.
yeah, meetings, and they're on their phone a lot. Like it's just a different type of work, but doesn't necessarily mean one is better than the other. When it comes to low level work, I haven't really heard of jobs referred to low level other than maybe entry level. Um, to me, like you have to have some sort of hierarchy of the jobs, because someone who has no experience and is in their very first job and employment, they are not going to suddenly be paid or kind of engage within an organization in the exact same manner as someone who is at the top of the organization and is responsible for the budget and the finances and the management of the people and all that stuff. So I think entry level usually means that you don't need specific skills to be able to be successful in the role. You don't need specific education. And then you kind of go from there. What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think that I agree with you. Low level, it sounds condescending, so I don't think people would use that term. I think that at a guess, I'd say they're referring to a worker level, right? Like, so you're not management. You're basically told to do your job and then you do it, right?
And in my organizations, we refer to that as like individual contributor or like a leader, manager, supervisor type thing.
Yeah, the idea is, I mean, you could be very well paid.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a reflection on your compensation. It's just that you're not management. You're not making decisions on how to do the job.
Right.
You're just being told to do it. And there are like worker level jobs that make like a lot of money, like a hell of a lot of money, a lot more than a lot of like lower white collar jobs. Certainly, it's not that white collar is up here and blue collar is down there. It simply describes the nature of the work you do. That's all. Yeah. So that's what I would agree with.
I think
Let's
our
see.
next question is from Alex. Bill, is it advisable to return to a job when
Is it advisable to? Well, I mean, everything happens some of the time, but I would say as a general principle, usually you're not gonna get that. Like there's going to be some exceptions, but generally, if you leave for some reason, like that's what we're talking about, you left and then you came back. Now, if you left for like, you were relocating, or, you're married to somebody who you move with them because of their career, okay, fair enough. But if you leave because there's a problem, your job was no longer needed, so they laid you off, or you decided to leave because you didn't like the job, grass is greener, you went to pastures new, but now you're coming back, um, generally, I think it would be better to move on to something new rather than step back into something where there's like some baggage and a history, but there's exceptions to everything. What do you think, Abby, on this one?
Yeah, I think it really depends. This is one of those like clear as mud answers where it's really circumstantial. It depends on the type of work, it depends on the organization, it depends on how you left and how they're feeling about you. My husband works for an organization that welcomes their people back if they do that. And in fact, there's like a like 6-month grass is greener period where they're like, if they come back within 6 months, then we'll actually reinstate where they were with their benefits and all that stuff. So they don't have
If
to
it's
start
over 6 months and you're blacklisted, is that the
then
idea?
they just have to start at the bottom, work their way back up.
Ooh, that's cold. Yeah.
Yep. But it's one of those things that if the organization doesn't take it personally and you don't take it personally, and there's no bridges that have been burned, there's no bad blood, then I think it's okay. If you have emotional baggage to overcome, if you were fired or let go for reasons that you feel like are kind of haunting you, then that's going to continue to be there because that kind of historical knowledge and institutional knowledge of you working with that organization hasn't been replaced. So
Yeah.
it really depends.
And it really, like you're saying, a component of it is going to be your personality and their personality. I've been asked this question in the context of, someone saying, I applied for a job with this employer, they rejected me. Should I apply to a different job going through the same person who rejected me? And I would say, as a default thing, I would say, look, the odds are in most cases there's plenty more fish in the sea. You should look elsewhere rather than coming back to a person who's already rejected you once. Because although anything can happen, my money would be on, like, if they've rejected you once, that kind of shows that sort of demonstrates they don't consider you like, immediate, like, high value person. You know what I mean?
You're not their best option.
Yeah, exactly. So they passed over you once, they'll probably pass over you again. In the same way that if you worked for an employer and it didn't work out once, should you, like 5 years later, you find like they're posting another job, maybe in a different department. Should I apply for them again, even though it didn't work out the first time? Ultimately, this is with a different department. And I would say, well, yeah, you can, but only as a last resort. There should be many more options out there. You should try and focus on surfacing those rather than crawling back to something that in a way is imperfect. It's blemished. It didn't work out, ultimately,
Yeah. Well, and I think that kind of along those same lines, like let's say that I was in a job and I decided to leave because I didn't enjoy my relationship with my supervisor, but I have no bad blood with the organization as a whole. And then I find another job that's a good fit for me, that's in a different department, or the supervisor that I didn't like got, moved on to something else in a different company. In that case, I would say it's perfectly acceptable to go back to that old organization. So it's all very dependent. I remember Alex from some live streams earlier in this year. And if you feel like your relationships are still good with the organization that you chose to leave, it's very easy to kind of forget about the struggles and the drama that you may have had in the previous roles. And it's good to remind yourself of that. Is that something that you want to potentially subject yourself to again? Or was it truly just that the job itself wasn't a good fit and now there's something else that is a better fit for you based off of your skills and your education and your experience and, all of those things. So
yeah, I think the flip side also applies. Like if you're an employee working for an employer and they picked you and you start working for them, and then a couple of years later something, you decide to leave for there's a better opportunity somewhere, right? But then maybe that didn't work out, or like you're talking about your husband's, where your husband works, but then you apply to come back. Now, from the employer's perspective, it's like, okay, you know, here's an employee who ditched us, you know, like, so, I mean, yes, they were a good employee, and yes, I might like them on a personal level or whatever, but ultimately, I feel that, like, you know, I saw their true colors. Their true colors are that they will jump if they see something better. That's what they've demonstrated, how, you know, how they behave. So that's going to kind of taint, you know, should I bring them back? There might be some advantages in bringing back like a known quantity, someone that
Yeah.
has worked with you, you're familiar with them, you've vetted them. But then again, they did jump ship, you know, so it's like that kind of taints it a little bit, you know?
Yep. Well, I think it's really interesting because I have these like rose-colored glasses that I like to wear from an employer perspective, where I think that, most hiring managers and supervisors and bosses all want what's best for you, and hopefully don't take those things personally. Um, and I've worked with a couple of clients who then continue to maintain good relationships with their past supervisors because they've chosen to leave for a job that pays more or gets them into like an additional skill set that they can build. And then like 3 to 5 years later, a new role with their old organization opens up. My hope would be that they would say, as long as you are qualified for this new role and we still want you, which I'm hoping that they would still want you,
Yeah.
we're going to bring you back. Because we recognize, I think, as humans, that it is unfair to judge someone who chooses to go do something that's better for themselves. And as supervisors and employers and leaders, I would hope that they would want what's best for their people, which is sometimes not the current role and the current organization. And
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's that kind of duality, because on the one hand, there's the thing I was talking about, which is more like a personal kind of vibe you get from somebody. It's like
yep.
you abandoned me, you know, like we hired you, but you know, we wanted you to work, but then you left, you know, right when we needed you. But obviously, what you're saying is absolutely correct. I mean, people are going to go where there are opportunities, and as a employer, as a business, I understand that. You know, if somebody else can offer them more compensation than me or give them better working conditions or whatever,
Mhm.
and I can't compete with that, then it's understandable that people are going to leave. It's an unrealistic expectation that they're going to be loyal and stay, you know, for some personal reason. You know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
but the thing is, we're in the process of predicting the future. When you hire someone, you're trying to make a prediction. Is this person going to work out? How is this relationship going to go? Just in the same way that, you know, the job seeker is looking at the employer and saying, should I take this job? Should I leave my current job if I'm currently working to take a chance with these people? Are they going to honor their commitments? Are they going to treat me properly? You know, you're trying to make a blind prediction about the future, and that's very wishy-washy. And you go on what data you do have, you know, and if they've demonstrated their behavior in the past, that is going to carry some weight, you know, rightly or wrongly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and Alex had a couple of like clarifying comments just at the bottom of our comment strings, saying that my contract wasn't renewed because of firings. And so in that
Mm.
case, it's probably not something personal on their side and
Yeah.
maybe not even on your side. If they had firings or budget cuts or something like that, and they just could not extend or renew your contract, then there's probably no hard feelings. And they would probably be happy having you come back to the role. And you might be happy because it's that known quantity. You know what to expect from the organization. Maybe it's even with the same supervisor and the same team. And then vice versa. They know what to expect from you. Um, so, with that additional information, I would say that there's nothing wrong with going back to a job. Um, but you now have additional experience and you have, maybe additional skills. And so the thing that you would want to be aware of is to ensure that you can kind of get a little bit more from a compensation perspective from them rather than starting back at where you were before. So that's where that negotiation will come into play.
Definitely. I think if we go back, I think we're on this Jakalaka,
Jakalaka. Yep.
Jakalaka, like Mekaleka Hi, Mekahini Ho kind of thing. I often see people say they are applying to 250 plus jobs in a month. I am choosing to focus on 2 to 3 opportunities a week. I'm wondering if it would be better to start putting in more applications. I would say absolutely. That's too little, especially in this day and age when all job seekers have essentially access to AI tools that can help them customize applications en masse. So you could apply to 100 applications a day and you can make them all custom applications. That's what you're up against, Jackalaka. And that's going to be an issue.
Yes. Well, and at the same time, if someone is applying to 250 jobs a month, I just did the math, that's over 8 jobs every single day if there's 30 days in that month. And that's not sustainable from a quality perspective. 2 to 3 opportunities a week is also not enough to get a bunch of active irons in the fire. So what I would recommend doing is a minimum of 2 to 3 quality applications a day. And then you can maybe have a couple more like automated applications that you can do during the day as well. I think it's really important when you're doing a job search that you give yourself a schedule and you structure it and you have a plan. Just blasting out infinite number of applications is not going to get you a lot of responses because you probably can't make the quality of your application that high. You
Yeah,
want to
that's the assumption that they're all generic too. It's
right.
like they're not customized, right?
Yeah.
That's the
You do
assumption.
need to spend some time customizing your application. You need to customize your resume slightly. You'll probably find that you have a type of resume that doesn't change all that much, but you still want to tweak some of the keywords and phrases within your resume. I'm a strong proponent of submitting cover letters. Some people don't love cover letters. I love them. I think it's something you should do for every job. There's maybe some other additional steps to the application process, like maybe you have to answer supplemental questions. Maybe you have to conduct assessments ahead of time. Maybe you do a one-way video interview. So there's, I think, blindly saying I'm going to apply to 8 to 10 jobs a day, that's a little overwhelming. I also think it's a little underwhelming to apply to 2 to 3 a week. So you want to ensure that you build enough opportunity by applying to enough jobs per week, which I think is probably 2 to 3 at minimum per day, maybe closer to 5 a day if you're full-time job searching, and then kind of go from there. With that schedule that I was talking about earlier, I think you should give yourself some time off too. Say Monday through Friday, I'm going to set my schedule from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm going to have, this set of my day where I'm responding to emails, checking my applications, trying to do some networking, some proactive work. Then I'm going to set this amount of time aside to actually apply to jobs. I'm going to look for organizations that I want to work for. So you have some structure and some strategy to it. And then take some time off, because applying 24/7, 7 days a week is going to burn you out. And then you're going to get lazy. And then you're going to submit a bunch of applications and not get any responses. And it's just going to be this vicious cycle that you're never going to be able to get out of.
Yeah. And I mean, this is if you're applying on the posted job market. I did a video on my channel about just over a month ago called How I Would Get a Job. And it's like a 45-minute video, but I walked people through 11 different methods of getting a job. So, in addition to doing this, just keep in mind there are many other things you can do rather than just simply blasting out applications to post to jobs on the internet. There's other activities, some of which are more fruitful than this, if you know what you're doing. So investigate those things too. If you're doing this as a component of a job search, then the quantities you're talking about, Jackalaka, that would make sense. If you're doing other things too, right? But if you're just doing this, I definitely agree with Abby that it's too little. I think I would draw the line of like the quantity of job applications per day. I would go a bit higher than Abby, but then again, I wouldn't necessarily be doing cover letters for everything and things like that. So it might not be as involved, but I mean, obviously it depends on what industry you're in, how many posted jobs there are, and how relevant they are to you.
Yep.
So there's going to be some variance there, but
Absolutely.
generally, I think we both agree that you need to do a lot more than like 2 to 3 a week. That's too. Even if you like really did a fantastic job on those applications, it's still too little. You should be able to do more than that and do like an A+ application where you really do everything as well as you can. So I don't know if you need to work more efficiently or you need to do other, maybe you're doing other things. I'm not sure, but that's what I'd say.
Yep.
Jackalaka says something very, very nice indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. I guess is the next one.
It
Speaking
is.
of remorse of getting hired, what would you do if you realized your boss regrets hiring you? Like they can't really fire you, but just are not impressed with your work. Well, I would try and improve my work and improve my performance, or at least go and talk to your manager and say, like, listen, I'm just wondering how you think I'm doing and what you think I should improve, and try and understand if there's like a problem with your perception. They think you're doing a bad job, but maybe that's not accurate.
Yep.
So whatever issue it is, I would try and find out what the issue is and try and fix it.
Absolutely. And the number one reason why people quit their jobs is because of their relationship with their direct supervisor or their boss. And so if you get hired and then you are starting to feel that your boss is, having remorse or regrets hiring you, you're probably going to be looking for a new job sooner rather than later if you don't get that resolved. And when it comes to relationships, boss and employee relationship, it's both people's responsibility to ensure that it works. It's not just the boss's responsibility, and it's not just your responsibility. So if you're getting this feeling, if your gut or your intuition or your instinct is telling you that there's something that's not quite right, that they're acting a little bit funny, or you're getting the feeling that they're not happy with what you're doing, talk to them about it. And the chances of you being able to resolve it are high, just with a little bit of conversation and then hopefully some actionable items. If you don't feel like you have room to improve, or you don't want to improve, or they give you feedback that you don't want to accept, then you're probably going to be starting the job search again soon.
Here's like a weird thing out of left field, with regard to this kind of stuff, talking to people and figuring out personal relationships and perceptions and all that. I'd like to ask you, Abby, have you seen the movie Some Kind of Monster by Metallica? You haven't seen that movie?
No.
You should watch that movie because, it came out like 2003, so somewhere in there, like 20 years ago. Anyway, it was like, this big, tough, masculine kind of like metal band. And they hired a therapist because the band members were not getting along. And I guess there are these like high level therapists that come in, and I believe this guy had a career working with like sports teams, where I think it was said in the movie, big dollar, big ego, people that but they had to get along so that they could make some entity flow, and then everybody could make money, right? So you'd hire like a high level therapist that would come in and get these people to relate to each other and get along with each other at least, and understand each other and have a positive relationship. And it was interesting seeing like, these big tough, like, heavy metal type people. And they're like talking, like in therapy sessions and like discussing their feelings with each other and discussing like, when you say this, I get fearful because I perceive it as meaning this. And, but as weird as that was, it really opened a lot of people's eyes to the value of being able to communicate like that so that you can resolve things. And like you just said, like you're absolutely correct. Like a lot of people, they leave jobs because they have a bad relationship with their boss. They don't see eye to eye, and it results in you quitting your job. You're being forced out basically. And wouldn't it be great if you had the tools to be able to just at least patch it up a little bit, you wouldn't have to leave your job. You wouldn't be overlooked for promotions and things like this. There's so much to benefit, by learning a little bit of this stuff. So I think everyone, if you're in your 20s or wherever you are, how kind of aware of this stuff and how to communicate and patch up personal relationships, I think it's definitely something you should invest in. If for no other reason, then your job is going to work out. You don't have to get kicked out of your job either by quitting because you can't stand it, or being let go because they don't like you. You know what I mean?
Yep. And there are 2 books I'm going to recommend. One of them is a book that I've recommended in like every other stream we've done, which is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. If you want, let me know if you want me to put the link into the chat, and I can send you the Amazon link. One of my most favorite books. It's like one of the most popular business books out there. I think they've sold 40 million copies in 40 different languages. There's a bunch of different versions of it. has a lot to do with how you perceive yourself and perceive others, and then gives tips on communicating and things like that. The other book is specifically about communication, and it's called Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg. And that's another great book where it kind of gives you some insight into these people who are just so good at communicating and what some of their secrets are. And it's not hard. It takes what's hard is changing the way that you do things, because you probably are doing things based on how your comfort level is and what you've learned and all of those things. But we all have the capacity to learn these skills to communicate really well with other people. And starting with your boss and your supervisor, the person who's probably going to be like how you feel about work is most dependent on that relationship with, why not start there? So if your boss is feeling like they are bummed about hiring you, then it could be a disaster waiting to happen if you don't address it. So
Yeah.
take the chance, have the conversation, and see where it leads.
Yeah. It's not going to end well if, like this situation that Alpine's pal is talking about,
Yep.
that's not a recipe for success. That's either you're going to quit because they're going to make your life miserable, or it's just so awkward that you're miserable there.
Yep.
Or they push you out. Like you're going to be the first one out the door if they have to downsize or whatever. I mean, whichever way you slice it, it's going to be bad. So,
Yep.
so imagine if you could just fix everything with one conversation. Might not be the funnest conversation. You might feel very awkward, but imagine if you could just fix that so that going forward, your boss gets the message. Listen, you're a good person. You're trying to do your job well. You're open to their suggestions. You're wanting to work with them. Like imagine if you could just have them understand that, I think that alone for most people, that would change things for the better, So it's worth kind of doing, just if you're going to get that big positive result, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, what's the worst that can happen? Already, if you're feeling like your boss doesn't like you, you're probably thinking about leaving to find a new job. So the worst that could happen is you have this conversation and nothing changes and you leave to find a new job. So it's, one of those things that I think it's worth it to have that level of discomfort and plan to have the job of having that conversation with your supervisor, because it's not a one-way street. It's not just your supervisor's job to communicate with you. It's your job to communicate with them as well.
Yeah. And like Abby was recommending some books, they've written many books that talk about this stuff over the years that, like, really for a lot of people, I mean, I don't know. I think that generally speaking, I think guys might have a problem more than the ladies in like talking about this stuff. I mean, I'm not sure, but I know for a fact that a lot of guys, it's like, this is really not where your head's at. Wanting to learn about what to say to talk about perceptions and feelings and stuff is kind of weird for a lot of dudes. You know what I'm saying? But like, if you could learn like a few key phrases of how to bring this up, what to say, how to articulate it, just like 3 or 4 kind of phrases that really help you. I mean, it can make all the difference between you being forced out of a job and you like actually getting along and doing well there and not hating it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the other book that's been written that I would recommend if I was recommending a book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's been around forever. It was like written in
that's a great one.
Yeah, when was it written? It was like written in the 1930s or something. And it's never been out of print. It's sold millions of copies. A business book has sold like millions of copies. And it talks about this stuff. It's like basically just what to say to people so that they like you, that's genuine, mm-hmm. and then things flow and things, just work out,
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, our next comment is from Catherine, all the way at the bottom of our comment section.
Okay.
And they say, once I left a job for $20 salary increase, only to be told after 2 years that there was no more of a job, and because of the economic climate. They did everything to get me there initially. That's such a bummer.
Yeah.
Such a bummer. And there's, if they choose to like let you go or not move forward with hiring you, like, ugh.
There's always risk. This is the thing. It draws attention to the reality that like there's always risk. Whenever you leave a job to take another job, or even you decide to stay in a job, there's always risk. The future is uncertain. And that's just the reality. We sometimes delude ourselves into thinking that that's not the case, but it is. And Catherine's experience kind of illustrates that.
Yeah.
I think it continues here, right?
Yep. She now has a question here.
Okay.
What are the best job boards right now? I use LinkedIn and Indeed. Are there any other job boards that work just as well or better? Ooh, job boards. I have strong opinions about this. So what about you, Bill? You go first.
Well, this not really. In all honesty, it's not really my area. I don't really focus on the posted job market that much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of the whole networking kind of hidden job market side. But I mean, yes, those to me, I believe, are the two most prominent. I mean, aren't there like things like ZipRecruiter? There used to be Monster. There is it Workopolis. There's several others,
There's
but
lots
you
of
don't
options
hear
out
about
there.
them as much.
Yeah, and I actually don't like job boards. It's
Mm.
a very popular way to start looking for jobs, but my number one piece of advice is similar to yours, Bill, which is use your network first.
Mm.
And then from there, I like to just scan job boards to see what types of organizations are hiring, what types of jobs are available. But what I don't like is that people will tend to rely only on those job boards and then
Yeah.
wonder why they're not hearing anything. LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor, Monster, ZipRecruiter, all of those will scrape job postings from across the internet and repost them on their website without any connection to the true employer, which is why I don't like them. Indeed is the best, example of this because so a lot of people will choose to use Indeed because it's a little bit more economical than like creating a whole applicant tracking system and HRIS system for their organization. It's still very expensive if they choose to go beyond the free version. And so many people don't have the budget for that. And so they just choose not to use that, which is then when networking becomes so important. So I think use LinkedIn and Indeed to just get a temperature of the job market, what organizations are hiring, what positions might be out there and available, but do not rely exclusively on job boards. You need to focus more of your energy on your network, building and maintaining relationships with other people so that you can engage in some reciprocity, you providing value for them and them providing value for you in terms of connecting you to potential jobs, than just blasting out applications through job boards.
Yeah, and for the introverts out there, like there's a lot of people that, you mention networking and they just cringe, and I mean, I used to be one of those people. It's just because the thing is, you're looking at it from the outside. You're not really seeing what it can be. First of all, networking can mean a lot of different things. It just means people interacting with other people. That's all it means. So I mean, there's many different versions of that. You could do it in person. You could do it, on social media. I mean, there's many different ways. You could have known the people for many years and you're just sort of connecting with them again or talking to them, or you could be reaching out to new people, right? Like that's the thing. You don't need to know a million people to do networking. You can reach out to employers. They're not posting a job, but you can say, hey, I'm here if ever you're looking. I'd love to work for you. I do this and this and this. You know what I mean? There's many different versions of it. So learn. I would recommend that everyone just learns about networking because, posted jobs are a component. That's one thing you can do, but there are many other things that you can do. So just don't be ignorant of like all the other things. At least have an awareness of other methods of getting jobs, and maybe in your job search campaign, if you're doing like posted jobs and you're looking at Indeed and LinkedIn, like Catherine, and there's nothing wrong with it, but like Abby says, it's there might be sources of better jobs than those. It's almost like it's like the bottom of the barrel in a way,
It's the easy way.
Yeah.
It's much more passive. And
Yeah.
so if you're just, passively looking for jobs, you're okay with sending out hundreds of applications, only use job boards. But if you want to speed up the process, if you want to connect with, other people in a much quicker way, not having to wait several weeks or months or never hear back from someone, just passively applying through job boards is not the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, like, the other thing about job boards is that you tend to go in with hundreds and hundreds of other applicants, like for all competing for the same job. Now, there's a bit of an art and a science to that, like all the stuff that we talk about on our channels about, customizing your resume. And, Abby talks about like cover letters and, you know, um, this kind of thing, how to do interviews and stuff like that. That's kind of geared to this situation where you're one of hundreds of applicants that applied for it. You're going head to head with like 800 people, and you're trying to elevate yourself above the crowd and like be the perfect fit, you know. And it's a situation where they're talking, if they do interview you, they're talking to several other people also, you know. So it's a different thing than like networking, where you reach out to companies that haven't posted a job and said like, I could help you, kind of thing. uh, they're only talking to you at that point. You have no competition. If there's a position, if they are hiring but they haven't posted it, there might be like one or two other people that are in consideration for it. So you're like one out of three
Yep.
competing for it. So it's a slightly different situation. You discover the jobs differently, you make a compelling case differently, and the things that they're looking at are like, it's different criteria. It's a different criteria. So or a different set of criteria. I got raked over the coals because I said like a different criteria in one of my videos, and I've never heard the end. That was like 7 years ago or something. I've never heard the end of that. People keep posting like almost every week, saying, you goofed that up. So it's a different set of criteria,
Yes. Or
Um,
criterion is maybe the
yes, the
singular versus
singular. Yeah,
plural. Oh
yeah.
gosh. Well, I think to answer Catherine's other part of her question,
Mm,
so are there any other job boards that work just as well or better? I think it really depends on the industry you're in. There might be industry specific job boards. I recommend, if you are in any industry, that you join a professional association or have professional memberships. Many times those affiliations or associations will have private job boards specifically for members. So that's a much more, I guess, like close to the source job board than something like Indeed that just has these crawlers scraping the internet. The other thing that I highly recommend doing is use LinkedIn and Indeed to find jobs, and then go directly to the organization's website and find the job itself on that organization's website and apply there. Not only do you ensure that it is the real job that you're applying to, but there's also some like back end tracking mechanism that can let the recruiters know how you found that job. So they might say this application came from Indeed, whereas this application came directly from our personal website. The like feeling associated with someone finding us through Indeed versus coming directly to our website and finding us through our careers page is that this person wants to work more for us when they come to our website directly. They're just looking at a bunch of different jobs if they come from Indeed. So there's some positive like psychology associated with applying directly on the organization's website if they have an internal job board that you can use instead.
absolutely. Okay, so I think this is the next one here.
Yep.
Replied Flame. So I have an interview at Chick-fil-A for
Mm-hmm.
food prep, but I only have experience in hotels. How can I get the job? Well,
Transferable skills. While we talk about this, I'm going to find my transferable skill video for you, and I'll share it in the chat. I don't know if you'll be able to see it because I'm going to be posting it, I think, to my channels. But if you follow my channel at all, transferable skills, look that video up. Just because you only, and I'm putting this in quotes, have experience in hotels does not mean that that experience is not transferable to Chick-fil-A and like food prep and food service. So a lot of the same skills are required. And in this type of job, it's not even necessarily like the hands-on skills that are important. It's your communication skills, your professionalism, your time management, your ability to prioritize, all of those more soft skills that are harder to train and harder to learn that you may inherently have just based off of your life experience. Those are things that you want to focus on. Anything else you want to add to that, Bill?
that's the most important thing. Is the transferable skills. Like, for example, you may not have worked in food prep, but you have experience working in a fast-paced environment. You're having to improvise. You're having to follow instructions. You're having to seek clarification when you don't understand the instructions. You know, time is of the essence. You're used to it. You're used to multitasking. Like if you break it down, like all the different aspects, right? Um, you've worked in a situation before where you've had to follow very specific procedures, you know, like especially under those time constraints and that kind of pacing. You know, you have to make the food a certain way and you can't deviate from that. Um, you know, being organized and putting things back properly, you know, collaborating with people around you, working around people, and like when you break it down, there's a lot of different elements, and you can say like, well, I've done all of that before in these other situations. The only other thing I would add is that, you know, there's a chance, I imagine, that the person interviewing you for this job would have a concern that, you know, food prep might be a problem for you. You might not be suited to that type of work. You might not have certain technical skills. So I would try and do like a crash course in food prep, or at least watch some YouTube videos, or like get an idea of like what it involves. So when you walk in there, you're not just like completely ignorant of like how food prep works. You know what they do, you know what it requires, and you know, you can talk to them about food prep, about some of the technical aspects, and they can tell like you know how to do it and you know what it involves. So that kind of just puts their mind at ease that like the food prep element of the job is not going to be, you know, some kind of showstopper or liability for you.
Yeah, and kind of an area to focus on when it comes to that is probably like compliance and safety. You know, how do
Yeah.
you ensure that you're going to be, you know, clean and preparing food in compliance with their policies and procedures and federal guidelines and things like that. One of the things I would also recommend doing is using generative AI to help your preparation.
There we go. Yep.
There's two different ways that I would recommend doing this. First is taking the job posting and asking the generative AI platform like ChatGPT or Grok to analyze the job posting and identify the top 5 to 10 core competencies critical for success in this role. And that will then give you, you know, based off of the job posting, what this generative AI platform believes to be the most important skills and competencies that you will bring to this role. You can then identify experiences and stories and things like that for you to then bring up during the interview process to showcase how you have those 10 or 5 to 10 competencies. And then the second piece is that you can prepare job interview questions for this. So based off of the job posting, here's my resume. What are 10 behavior-based interview questions, situational-based interview questions, and technical interview questions that I could be, you know, asked during this job interview? Give a couple details. How long is the interview going to be? Who are you going to be speaking with? Is it a recruiter? Is it you know, I don't know what they call them, you know, a franchise owner? Like, who's going to be the person that you are interviewing with? Put that information in there, and it can give you very specific questions that you can start to prepare or practice answers to. Now, these are not questions that will guaranteed show up during the interview, but just going through the preparation process will help you feel more comfortable and confident in answering whatever question they throw at you during the interview process.
Definitely. We have another question here from Catherine. How do you spin your previous career in executive sales when your last job was in performance coaching and you have recently gotten your doctorate in organizational psychology and you are older? Well, there's many ways you could spin all this stuff. That's some high level capability there. It really depends on what you're going for. I mean, that's the thing that you really, in order to know what to do, you need to know what your goal is. So, um, if you could, if you know that, Catherine, or you have an idea, if you could share that with us, I think we could both speak a lot more intelligently if we know what you're going for. But I like questions like this.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of like Abby was just talking about transferable skills. There's a lot of stuff in there. Like, holy crap, you know, it all kind of, and those things tend, it seems like there's a lot of overlap, you know, they're different areas, but there's a lot of overlap between those skills.
Yep. And again, Catherine, I don't know if you can see the things that I added to the chat. At least it's on my stream. The transferable skills video. I have one that's specifically on transferable skills that I put together. And then Bill and I also discussed transferable skills during a live stream. So it's like an hour and a half live stream that you could watch. We talk specifically about transferable skills. So check those out if you haven't already. And then, yeah, we'll keep an eye on the chat to see if you might be able to give us some more specific information about what role you're applying to. But what's great about all of your previous experience is that you likely have a very robust set of transferable skills that you can pull from for whatever job or industry that you're moving into. I think the one thing that I'm going to make some assumptions about your comment is the fact that you brought up that you're older. And that is something that could always hold people back because we have these biases just in general about if someone is too young to be able to get into a
We're
job.
all looking for that 21-year-old who's got the PhD in organizational psychology with a
Right.
background in executive sales. Yes.
Right. So someone might be too young for those exact reasons, or someone might be too old. Like, and we as um, people will make assumptions and judgments and all of those things about someone just based off of what we see, hear, read, etc. We have to fill in those gaps. So I think that might be an area of focus for you, is saying how can you frame your experience as a benefit to whatever role that you're going to be moving forward to the client base, to the organization, to the team. How will you use that experience in a positive way, and how will it not hold you back? Many times, from a recruiting perspective, people are afraid to hire older people because they are worried that those people lack skills or flexibility to learn new skills, that they might only be in it for a certain period of time before they hit retirement. So there's lots of judgments. And so you have to proactively address those things and not necessarily say, like, well, you should hire me because, X, Y, and Z, but be really skillful about how you weave in the benefits of your experience, not your age, but your experience that you're bringing to this new role and organization. And so Catherine clarified, I would like to be a coach or consultant full-time. I'm in New York City.
Well, that ties in exactly with, it seems like, with the whole, your last job was in performance coaching and you
Mm-hmm.
want to be a consultant. So you would consult in, like, your goal is to consult in which of these areas, like any one of these areas, like organizational psychology. Presumably, if you just got your doctorate in that, that's probably what you would want to, I'm assuming, consult in, right? Organizational psychology. So that's what? That's like organizational behavior, that kind of
Yep.
stuff, like
And it's
helping.
kind of like what you were talking about earlier, Bill, with that movie. Organizational psychology is like the workplace psychology.
Yeah.
So people working together, the psychology of change, the psychology of implementing new process and procedure.
Yeah. Behaviors, like what behaviors you're getting and why, and, how can, like, it's actually a really interesting area. I mean, to take an MBA, you have to take a course, at least one course in like organizational behavior. It's
Yep.
really interesting. It's like, how can, it's like questions like, okay, for example, like a CEO, how can you have control over how something goes, like a decision,
Mhm.
but yet you are not perceived as being responsible if it backfires, things like that, right? And
Yep.
all the tools that are, agenda setting and like all the different things, controlling a committee, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's a really interesting area. It seems like that's kind of a growth area right now. The last 10, 20 years, that's been really growing. And it makes sense that it's growing because there's major, major inefficiencies when it comes to people working with each other in organizations. A lot of power politics, a lot of turf wars, a lot, all kinds of things like weird perceptions of other people's motives and all this kind of stuff, and whether it's real or imagined, it gets in the way of work. Like, if you think of large organizations, and how one general trait is that they don't want to empower their employees. They want all employees to not take initiative, but yet instead ask for permission before doing anything, get approval for anything. Quite the opposite culture of, say, like startups, where they want you to take initiative and just go ahead and get things done and achieve things. Um,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting area. So, I mean, you're asking, like, how can you spin what you've done into doing that? Um, I don't know if this is relevant to you, but something I did, like, to go from working in a company to being an independent consultant was I did a ton of informational interviews, almost exclusively with CEOs. And, that might be something. If you're in New York City and you're talking about this stuff, organizational psychology, you got a PhD in it, it's like, you could reach out to CEOs and other, maybe like the people in the HR organization, directors of HR, and say like, look, here's what, you know, like get them to talk about some of their perceptions of the stuff. What are some of the issues they're dealing with? And then you say what can be done to help them and stuff like this. And then that can lead to a lot of opportunities to come in and consult, or come in and, do project work, for them, or even like get a job in their HR organization, like
Yeah.
working on this stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities there. It starts with getting in front of these people. And it's always going to be people higher up, people that are at least one level above you, because they have the power to hire you and to contract you and to bring you in as a consultant. They have to be above you. You have to be able to learn how to approach those people and get them to want to talk to you and stuff. So
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, Catherine's got a couple of kind of additional information comments coming through. But so you say that you're with the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychologists, and there are a couple of jobs listed there, which is great. It also kind of depends on where you want to go. If you're, comfortable trying to do coaching and consulting on your own, that is like its own thing where, Bill's advice, I think, is really solid when it comes to doing those informational interviews as you start to build your own practice.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yep. And I think it's also relevant from a like employment perspective, because maybe some of these people that you can talk to know the types of organizations that employ organizational psychologists that you could then look into. Now, one of the things I think to consider is your school. So you just got a PhD in this, your doctorate. Do you have any advisors or professors from your program that you could connect with who might have connections to consulting firms or coaching firms? And then you've got like the big ones, like you had mentioned, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan Chase. Those are huge organizations. They employ industrial and organizational psychologists. How can you figure out who those people are to get in and have those conversations? The director of HR for JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs might not have time to meet with you, but if you can go on LinkedIn and identify maybe another IO psychologist who works for JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs and just set up a conversation with them, they might be able to connect you to their boss, who then can get you, additional opportunities or let you in on what their hiring process looks like. Or maybe it's not even that they employ them themselves. Maybe it's a different consulting firm. So having conversations and building your network is for sure important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess you're in New York. So, I mean, you're what you're talking about, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. I mean, to me, those would be like in the category of like celebrity CEOs. I've never met celebrity CEOs. I don't recommend trying to do that. I mean, not if you're someone like me. I mean, I'm talking about like the thousands upon thousands of other companies that are not, celebrity status CEOs, but they got a lot of money. They're multi-million-dollar companies. They're looking for people like you to be able to make them more efficient and be able to, sort of get their HR, resources working properly. I mean, that's the thing. It seems like to me that there's so much room for improvement when it comes to this. Like we talk about, Abby and I on our channels, we talk about like a tiny subset of HR, which is like recruitment and selection. I mean, there's so much more to HR. And whenever I'm on LinkedIn, which is not very often, but whenever I see in the feed, it's this kind of stuff being talked about, like, how organizations can improve, their employees working together. Even like a very specific topic, like, for example, information hoarding versus information sharing, right? Now, there's like a topic within, organizational behavior. Organizations want employees to share their knowledge so that, they're all cross-trained and, if anyone
and trust.
Yeah, if any one person leaves the company, you don't lose that knowledge. Like you have other people that knew how to do the things that person did. Obviously, employees have the opposite incentive. They want to make themselves irreplaceable, so they don't want to share their knowledge. They want to hoard it because that means you can't get rid of me. If you get rid of me, then there's no one else here that knows how to operate this equipment or something. You know, so like real issues like that. You know, and a lot of companies. You know, there's a lot of consultants, as I understand it. There's a lot of people that claim they can help with this, but my impression is that not many people actually can.
Yeah.
So if you have some genuine knowledge and insight into this, or you've got a PhD in it to start, like that's already putting you above most people. It seems like you could actually make a lot of improvements, and it would just be a matter of getting you in front of the right people
Yes.
who are interested in that. And I take your point about like, you know, the HR directors themselves might not be into this. I would agree with that. HR directors and HR people want you to follow the HR processes,
Yep.
right? They're not fans of going around and outside of it. Whereas CEOs and other executives, they're always looking for opportunities, people that can help them, you know. So what might be better is to talk to the CEO, and then once they're kind of sold on you, they bring the HR director in and say, like, I want to work with this person, make it happen, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I think, some other opportunities could be finding organizations where you could start to present topics at conferences or events for them so that you can start to network that direction.
Yeah,
You're showing up as
publicize
an
yourself.
expert.
Yeah.
Yep. You're showing up as an expert that they can then hire for consulting or things like that. I think the other thing to potentially, consider is just if you're in the job search or a job, in the market right now for a job, maybe dedicate some of your job search time to building your online presence and showing that you are a thought leader and an expert in this field by, like Bill said, creating some content around, information hoarding versus information sharing and the, benefits to everyone for information sharing and like ways to go about doing that. Something that is free for someone to consume, provides them some value, and then makes them go, I actually think I want to work with this person and bring them into my organization. I think,
Yeah, that the information hoarding. I just see a comment here.
yeah,
Information hoarding. I mean, that's like one of like 100 topics that
yeah,
everyone knows about in these circles, but very few people actually can help with.
yep,
Everyone claims they can. Everybody would love you to think that they have the solution, but very few people could actually really help with that. It's a very complex kind of thing, you know, and so you might be one of the people that might actually be able to help with this, you know, in a real way, you know?
Well, I think if you are in a place where you're applying to jobs and you're using job boards and you're identifying organizational psychologist positions within companies that you're wanting to apply to, I think one of the things to focus on is the results that you've achieved in your past positions related to the results that they're wanting you to achieve as an IO psychologist for their organization. So quantifying your achievements, quantifying your metrics, highlighting the results that you've been able to achieve, the relationships you've been able to build with people. That's what they'll care about more on your resume and your application than like bullet points of the things that you've done in past jobs. They're going to want to know more about the tangible results that you've been able to achieve from this, psychology coaching perspective.
Makes sense. I think to sum up, I would say for me, informational interviews are going to be your biggest
Yeah.
vehicle
Because
to,
not only does it give
you know,
additional information, but it also builds that network to then be able to rely on in the future for potential jobs.
yeah, like content creation. I mean, you would have to know about content creation uh, certainly more than me. I don't really know. Like I talk about sort of business topics on my channel, and I mean the people that I would want to work with, like with regard to that stuff, they don't watch YouTube. I mean, you know, it's not like some kind of status symbol for them that's on their radar. So I don't know. I would suspect that that might be the case, but you don't know until you go out and check. So you get in front of these people
Right.
and ask them. You know, like ask them, like, you know, what carries weight with you. Essentially, get an idea of that. That would be one of the first things you'd want to find out. And then, depending on what they say, now you kind of have an idea of what you have to kind of do to get on their radar and have them regard you as a valid sort of resource. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm just trying to read 37 different comments here, one after
Right.
another here.
Well, I think, kind of along the lines that you're going, Bill, like the audience that this person might be trying to reach is maybe not on TikTok, or YouTube, but maybe more on LinkedIn, or some other professional platform that I don't know of. And so doing some research on that, asking people what they use, how they get their information, can you create like a visual graphic that draws people's eyes and then have them want to come to you in that way. Um, Lots of options out there.
See this thing you say right here. Those people only hire from top schools and can buy anyone they want. It's a challenge getting to them. Now, what I my immediate knee jerk reaction to this is, do you know this for a fact, or is this a guess? You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people like to think they know based on like preconceived ideas and notions, but they don't actually know. You know, so do you know this for a fact? Because what I would say is that that's certainly possible if you're like at some very elite high level, like in New York City. You have access to like a sort of executive level plus, like you get there's a caliber of executives working in a place like New York that you won't find in places like Minneapolis or you know Cleveland. You know what I'm saying? Like there's that plus level. It's like the elite. Um, so may, I don't know, but I could believe that that's how some people at that level think. Right now, if that's true, fair enough. But there will be a level below that where they're not going to say, "Oh, I'm not going to hire you. I'm not going to entertain you because you haven't gone to Yale or Harvard or Brown or some Ivy League school." You might have a track record that speaks for itself. You know what I'm saying? And that trumps any kind of notion of like, what school you went to or something like that. You know what I mean? If you have a track record of success, that can get you places. Now, you don't start at the top. You start maybe down here, right? In organizations you can help. They're open to you because you got a PhD, for God's sake. You know your stuff. And if you've had a history of working out in the private sector and helping people, helping organizations and making tangible bottom line improvements to them, you've got all that riding on it. So you kind of work your way up, right? You don't have to start at the absolute peak there. You could start with like companies that have like 500 employees,
Yep.
they're big enough for you to make a major difference, but they're not so big that they have this elitist attitude that, you're just not the type of person they would even talk to or something. So,
And I think along those same lines, at the same time, you don't know if you don't try. So
yeah,
just say that you're kind of writing off these large, top tier organizations just because it's what you've heard. That doesn't mean that that's actually going to be your experience. So, if let's just say you would love to work at Goldman Sachs, is there someone that you can connect with that relationship will ultimately pay off? Who knows?
absolutely. We got a question here from Pratik. Pratik says, "What are the most important competencies really needed for a job?" Well, there's technical skills, but on top of that, what is kind of off the radar are soft skills, and that ultimately, at the end, that's usually how they select people.
Yep. And I think if Pratik were to go back into our conversation on this live stream, my opinion is that the most important competency is communication. How you
Yes.
communicate and connect with other people will set you apart from everyone else. You could be the worst at doing the job, but if you have really great communication skills, you'll probably have people who are willing to help train you or set you up for success. Like, you don't need all the skills to be able to succeed, but if you don't have communication, you're going to be out of there. You're never going to be considered, or if you do get, brought into the position, they're going to want to kick you out and move on with someone else who can communicate in a much more effective way.
And for people that are just kind of starting out, let me explain at least my version of what that actually means. Like when we talk about communication skills, for example, you're in a job interview. They say, "Have you ever? Do you know how to do this certain thing?" Okay, so maybe it's a technical aspect of the job. You're trying to get a job working in the kitchen of a restaurant. They say, "Do you know how to cook lobster or something?" And you say, Absolutely. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So yes, you're communicating. Okay. But that's what you say. But what message do they receive? They might receive, oh, you say you know how to cook lobster, but I don't believe you. Right. That's the message that's received. Right. Because they say, do you know how to cook lobster? And you say, absolutely. Like in a way that, they receive, you're probably lying. Right.
Mhm.
Um,
They seem too
or,
confident and
yeah,
didn't give any context.
yeah, exactly. Or they say, "Do you know how to cook lobster?" And you say, "Yes, I do." But what they receive is they receive, "Oh, you know how to cook lobster, but you don't like doing it, and therefore you're probably not very good at it." That's what they receive, right? So when we talk about communication skills, we're not simply talking about how to talk and how to like use a language. We're talking about how to how to send and have them receive the exact message we want them to receive without any kind of weird interpretation, without it being garbled. You know what I'm saying? It's actually a lot more sophisticated than you think. And so when we talk about communication skills, that's kind of what we're talking, at least as far as I'm concerned, what we're really talking about. That
And I
kind of
think
thing.
using your example of like, do you know how to cook lobster? Like that's a close-ended question. It would make sense if I just answered that as yes. And it's probably not what they're looking for. Say, yes, as a matter of fact, I have X number of years cooking lobster because I worked in this area where we specialized in seafood and lobster was our specialty. And, I found that the most humane way to go about it is X, Y. You can give
I
some
can do
detail.
lobster fricassee. I could do lobster flambe. I could do lobster. Yeah. It's like, and then they go, oh, okay, now I believe you, or
Yep.
something like that. Like
Yeah.
it's less intuitive to a lot of people.
Give that specific context and clarity to show them that you not only understand what they want, but that you have that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So communication is, I think, the most important competency really needed for any job, because really there's no job where you're by yourself. Other people are going to be involved with work, whether it's even if you're a one person show, you're still going to be communicating with potential clients, maybe potential vendors, like all of those things. Even if you're at a computer all day working on Excel spreadsheets, you probably have to communicate with your team or your supervisor, or like there's going to be some aspect of communication that is essential to your success in any role.
Yeah. Like also things like charisma, like that's part of soft skills. You could be a technical genius, but if nobody wants to work with you because they find it annoying or they find it frustrating or they find it awkward or like there's some other issue like that, then it's not going to go well. They won't pick you. They won't say, I want to work with that person.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it's totally independent of your technical skills. It has nothing to do with your technical skills. You could be an absolute whiz, but at the end of the day, some of these things really end up being more important because the reality is that they can find several people that have the technical skills that they need, but
You
they're not.
also have the communication or soft skills.
Yeah, yeah. One of them is like super likable, and the other one really isn't. My I got a screensaver that's going off like every 30 seconds. It's really weird. It just blacks out my screen. Anyway, so that's what I would say is the most important element. All these things taken together, all the soft skills, that's what's most important. That's what's going to get you hired, rightly or wrongly, whether it should work like that or not. That is kind of the reality.
Yep. Yep. So we had another comment from Emil come in at the very bottom saying, what do you think when, as an interviewee, you want to end the interview because you understand you're not getting the job / next round? Any way to not make it sound rude?
What do you think?
I think this is an interesting question because you're making assumptions
I wouldn't
about,
do that.
the outcome. I think that if you realize it's not a good fit for you and you actually don't want the job, it's perfectly acceptable to end the interview and then, leave from there. But in most cases, if you think that you are not going to move on to the next round or you're not going to get the job, ending it and like, what's the benefit of that? Because maybe
Yeah, in all honesty, I think it's dumb. I think it's
I
just dumb.
wouldn't do that.
Don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
listen, especially if it's like a physical interview where you go down to their physical location, you do a face-to-face interview. Don't do this. Like if you've gone to all that trouble, just try and get the job. If they don't offer it to you, great. No big loss. Who cares? But since you've gone to all these great lengths to go down there and do this, just see if you can get them to offer it to you. Then you've got some options. You can either throw it back in their face, or you never know. It might turn out that they are end up paying you a lot more than you thought. Like what's
And
the harm?
yeah, and maybe they choose not to move forward with you for this role, but they actually say they have a better role that's a better fit for you, and they were going to offer you that other option, but because you shut them down early, they've decided that they're not going to move forward with you with any option.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think it's cutting your opportunities too short too soon.
yeah. I
Don't
mean,
do it to
I
yourself.
get it. We all have egos, and if you feel like they're being condescending or they're being disrespectful, like it would be so satisfying just to say, screw you, or you can take your job and shove it, kind of thing, and then you walk out of there feeling better on some personal level. But you really want to try not having to do that. You know what I mean? It really doesn't make any sense from any kind of productivity standpoint.
Yep.
It just yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we skipped a bunch of things from, at least it
Catherine.
seems like we skipped a bunch of things from Catherine here.
Yep. So Pratik had the next comment under Emil, which was, what about innovation? Is it important? And I think that that's a follow-up to their question about what the most important competency is for any job. And I think innovation is important. And if you can't communicate, then that innovation doesn't matter, because innovation usually requires getting some buy-in from other people, taking some risks, maybe experiencing failure. And if you're bad at communicating, people aren't going to want to risk that innovation with you.
It also feels to me more like a buzzword. I mean, if you're at the worker level, you really don't have a lot of control over stuff like that. Either your job involves that stuff or it doesn't.
Yep.
Either their expectations are that you're going to find new and exciting better ways of doing things, or you're just going to follow instructions. You know what I mean? Like, you could do either depending on what they want. You know what I mean? I agree with Abby. Like, it is important, but I mean, it's communication and soft skills are really where it's at.
Yep.
So did we answer all of Catherine's stuff here?
I think we did. I think she was kind of just like commenting as we were discussing her situation. So I think below this, our next question is from Michael Perry. It's the second to last comment that I can see in our list. And it says, so let's say I'm from Africa, right where job opportunities is very hard, and I'm trying to make my way in the USA to get a job. How will that be possible? Well, I'm not an expert in international employment. If you're wanting to get a job in the United States, then you have to make sure that you meet the qualifications for it. And one of those qualifications is probably like having a work visa and going through that whole process of, applying and getting approval to work in the United States. And I am not an expert in what that looks like, but that would be my
and I'm not in the United States, so
yeah, that would be my first recommendation. Is if you want to work in the United States, you've got to figure out what the rules and like visa requirements are for that, and then start there. And then once you have the ability to work legally in the United States, then start applying to jobs. And then from there, I think
that's pretty much the end of the feed. It looks like,
which is pretty good timing because we're almost to our hour and a half mark.
In this conversation. That worked out. Listen, there are 24 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. If you do have a last minute question, you got like about 30 seconds to post your question. But we're coming up to our end point here. We do this every 2 weeks, so we will be live again answering questions, the two of us at once, 2 weeks from today. So Monday in 2 weeks. Yep. And as always, like any job with regard to job search or careers, any question with regard to job search or careers is open season for us. We'll do our best to try and help you out. Anything you're confused about or wondering about or having an issue with, we'll try and help you out as best as we can.
Yep.
Study Map says, well, I'm from Canada and
I'm from the United States.
Yeah, so that's So international relations going on here.
Yes.
Michael Perry says, thank you, Michael Perry. Catherine says, what about AI? Should everyone know AI for any job? Well, it's like saying, should everyone understand how to use the internet?
Hmm.
Like, it's a good thing across the board. It's going to be increasingly important as we go forward.
Yep.
Um, I'm sure not everyone needs to know AI for their job now or for in the foreseeable future, but it's just a good idea. It's the
Right.
latest tool. There's a lot of new and exciting things happening constantly with AI.
Yep.
Um,
And I
so
would say that it's not going to hurt you if
yeah,
you are aware of AI and if you have some technical ability with it. It certainly can help streamline a lot of processes or parts of every job that are out there. I can't think of one job off the top of my head um, where you wouldn't be able to, engage with AI in some way. You probably, if you're a medical doctor, don't want to be relying on AI to, give you answers for your patients. But at the same time,
I don't know. I've gotten some better answers from Chat GPT than I have from some physicians.
exactly. It can help you improve your communication skills. It can help you, evaluate the tone of emails and things like that. So I think there's no harm in learning and understanding and becoming fluent with AI.
Yeah, this is similar. Is learning Chat GPT necessary for a job? Well, not
No.
for all jobs, but it's just a good idea across the board.
Yep.
And learning it is like just learning how to type a question. I mean,
Yep.
there's not much to learn to get you started with that.
Yep.
Number one advice for older workers.
I would say don't give up. It's tough. The best thing you can do as an older worker is recognize that there probably will be some bias that you're going to face. It's likely going to be unconscious on the recruiter or the hiring manager or interviewer's perspective. They're not going to outwardly admit that they're not moving forward with you because of your age. So you have to be really proactive about how you demonstrate your skills and your capabilities and how your experience is going to make you more valuable and unique than someone who is younger. But don't write yourself off, because if you already are saying, I'm not going to get these jobs because I'm older, or they're making these choices because I'm older, that is going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So don't believe it, because it's possible for you to get hired even with your additional experience that you're bringing to the table.
I it's hard to make this sound not condescending, but and I don't mean it in a condescending way, but one of the cliches, one of the things that people often repeat about older workers in general, is that I think there's two things. They're not willing to learn new things,
Mm-hmm.
and they have some issue with their attitude. Like they don't pay attention to sensibilities as much as perhaps younger people do. Although I don't know, in this day and age, I mean, that does seem to not really be the case either.
Yeah.
But all I would say is that, like, pay attention to uh, people's feelings and stuff. It's very tempting to just give it to somebody straight, and God knows a lot of people need that. However, you're not going to be rewarded for that. You're not going to be perceived very well for that if you haven't figured this out already. So just artificially try and be a little more polite, and
Yeah.
a bit open to things. Once again, I don't mean that in a condescending way. That a lot of older people just kick ass, and there's a lot of experience there. So, a lot of people are made to think it's a disadvantage. It really isn't in a lot of areas.
Yep. I
So
agree.
that's what I would say. Um,
And then our final question: how should I lie about job experience? Don't
well,
lie
you
about
could
job experience.
yeah. I mean, you could tell them you're Batman. See what they'll say. See if they'll go for it. You could tell them the song, "I'm So Vain" was written by you. You
Yep.
know,
You
uh,
know the people who invented the Post-it note.
that's right. You are the person who invented post-it note. See if they'll buy that.
Yep. So don't
Um,
lie about your job experience. That doesn't mean that you can't. Um, how do I want to put this?
selectively kind
Yes,
of talk about the good points about your job
yes,
experience.
yes. You can be
Focus on the
selective
good.
about the truth of what you've done, but at the same time, lying, while it might get you the job, is probably not going to keep the job for you.
The other thing is that, like, because I know that some people just don't believe that. The thing is, it's hard to lie convincingly. You know, I know because not because I've tried it, but because I've had people try it on me.
Mhm.
And like they say, oh, I've done this and I've done that. But yet, like, you know, you ask them the simplest, most basic follow-up question to that when they claim they've done it or when they haven't, and they look at you like you've got seven heads. They have no idea. Or they say something that just completely demonstrates they have no idea what they're talking about. You know, so it really doesn't get you very far, you know, a lot of the time.
Don't try to
You
cheat
know?
and game the system. Don't lie about your job experience. Be honest about the experience you have. Get creative about how you um, present your transferable skills and your experience as it relates to the jobs that you're applying to. If you don't meet minimum qualifications, don't apply. Like there's a lot of, very black and white things when it comes to this. And one of those black and white things is don't lie on your application.
Yeah, this is the last thing I'm going to say in this live stream, and I've said this before, but a job interview is not a deposition. Like, you know, it's not a court of law. It's not like you have to take an oath and you have to tell the whole truth. It's like you can not disclose things if you don't want to disclose it. That's perfectly okay. You know, now they have the perfect right to say, well, sorry, you know, I need you to disclose that or else you don't get the job, you know, but you don't have to share things with people if you don't want to. But if you do it in a very brash kind of like, you know, arrogant kind of way, that's pretty much guaranteeing you're going to fail. So it's not about lying, it's about selectively saying the good aspects. You know, everybody's got like bad aspects of them, things they haven't done, things they failed at. We all have that, but we also have a lot of good points. You know, learn how to emphasize the good points and minimize the bad points. Deflect, you know, the questions that are probing you, asking you about bad things. Learn how to minimize that and give them good things instead. You know, you shouldn't have to lie about anything really. You know what I mean? Like if you know what you're doing in a job interview. So that's where I'm going to leave that.
And I think that's a great place for us to cut our session for today. Bill and I stream every other week together on Mondays. It looks like the next Monday that we will be on is Monday, October 6th. So if you have questions, we'll see you at the same time, same place. This is usually my one live stream that I do, but Bill live streams pretty frequently. So if you're coming from my channel and you want to get some more insights from Bill, please check out his channel. He live streams several times a week on multiple different topics that are really valuable, and then has some courses that he offers for you to purchase to just enhance your marketability and the way that you can come across during interviews and things like that. So
Yeah, I don't work with people one on one. That's why I did courses instead. But if you are looking for a career coach, someone that is going to work with you, give you feedback, work on your resume with you, work on your interviewing technique with you, someone that's going to be in your camp to really help you succeed, you're looking for such a person. These people are called career coaches, and Abby is one of them. So check out her channel. You know, she offers services. She works with a lot of people and helps them to succeed in this game of job search and careers that, you know, we're dealing with. So check out her stuff, check out her channel, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.
yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.